It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Maria stepped into the small diner, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She was not supposed to be working today, but when the regular shift waitress had called out sick, Maria had been forced to pick up the shift. The diner was not busy, but the little bit of business they had was enough to keep her on her feet. Maria had always prided herself on being strong, capable, but today was different. The bills were piling up. Her rent was overdue, and she was barely scraping by. She had dreams, ambitions, but it felt like they were slipping further out of reach with each passing day. As she wiped down a table near the window, a man entered the diner, shaking off the rain as he stepped inside. He was tall, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, his face partially obscured by a worn cap. He walked with a quiet grace, the kind of calm that stood out in a noisy world. He took a seat at the counter, his eyes distant, almost like he was in his own world. Maria didn't think much of it at first. She had seen countless people come and go, many of them lost in their own thoughts. But something about this man caught her attention. His presence was different. Something about him felt familiar, but she could not place it. She walked over to him, offering a tired smile. "Oh, what can I get you?" "Wow," she asked, trying to mask the exhaustion in her voice. The man looked up at her, his gaze piercing yet kind. "Oh, just a coffee." "Oh," he said, his voice low, but steady. Maria nodded, turning to prepare the order. As she poured the coffee, she couldn't help but glance back at the man. There was something intriguing about him, something almost magnetic. But she had no time for distractions. She needed to keep working, keep moving. She brought the coffee over to his seat, placing it in front of him with a quiet clink. Anything else?" She asked. He shook his head, offering her a small smile. "Oh no, thank you, he said. Maria nodded and turned to leave, but something made her pause. The Manad calmness, his quiet strength, felt like a reminder of everything she had been trying to forget, how far she had fallen, how much she had lost. She took a deep breath and walked away, trying to shake off the sense of unease. But the day dragged on. Time moved slowly, and the diner remained almost empty. Maria couldn't stop thinking about the man at the counter. There was something about him, something that nagged at her. She couldn't explain it. But it was as though he was Naradam, just any ordinary person. The feeling lingered like a whisper on the edge of her mind. As the hours passed, Maria Tm's thoughts kept returning to the quiet man at the counter. It wasn't his appearance that stood out. He was dressed simply, his face partly hidden by his cap. It was his demeanor, the calm aura he exuded, that drew her in. She found herself stealing glances at him, wondering who he was and what had brought him to her small diner on such a dreary afternoon. She could not shake the feeling that there was something familiar about him, something she could not place. Just as she was about to turn to another task, Maria noticed the man looking up, catching her gaze. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. There was a depth in his eyes, a quiet wisdom that she could not ignore. He didn't smile or say anything, he simply watched her. Maria felt a strange pull, an undeniable sense that she was meant to speak with him. She hesitated for a moment, but then the words slipped out before she could stop herself. "Are you sure you don't want anything else?" she asked, her voice softer than she had intended. The man didn't seem surprised by the question. He simply nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "Good, thank you," he replied, his voice calm and steady. Maria returned to her tasks, but something in her lingered. She could remember the last time she had felt a connection with someone like this, someone who was demanding, who didn't see her as just another waitress. But as the afternoon wore on, the diner started to empty, the lunch rush winding down, and still, the man remained at the counter. Maria worked around him, glancing over every so often, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for something. It wasn't a long before the rain began to slow and the diner grew quieter. The man remained seated, finishing his coffee, his eyes lost in thought. Maria finally found the courage to approach him again. "I've got to ask," she said, her voice tentative. "Is there something I should know? You just seem different, like I have seen you before." The man looked up, his expression unreadable. For a moment he said nothing, and Maria Tm's heart skipped a beat. Was she being too bold? Had she crossed a line? But then slowly he spoke. "Maybe you have," he said softly. "Maybe you, Tm, seen me in the movies." Maria blinked, confused. "The movies?" she repeated, unsure of what he meant. He nodded slightly, the faintest smile on his lips. "Yes. Clint Eastwood." Maria froze. The words hit her like a thunderclap, her breath catching in her throat. Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood? She blinked, stunned, and for a moment the world around her seemed to spin. She had been serving the legendary actor, the man whose face graced billboards and movie posters, the one whose movies had shaped Hollywood. But here he was, in her small diner, sitting quietly like any other customer. It didn't TMAT make sense. Maria stood there for a long moment, the weight of Clint Eastwood, TM's revelation settling over her like a heavy fog. She couldn't TMT speak, the realization that the man she had been serving, the man who had come in so quietly and humbly, was none other than the legendary actor, left her speechless. It was surreal. Clint Eastwood, the man who had shaped a generation of movie lovers. With his iconic roles, the tough stoic figures he portrayed, was sitting in front of her, just a man, just a quiet customer at her diner. For a moment the world around her seemed to blur. Her pulse quickened, and she felt as if everything she knew was turned upside down. What was she supposed to do? How was she supposed to act? But then, as if sensing her turmoil, Clint smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was enough to remind her that he was just like anyone else. "I know this must be a bit of a shock," he said, his voice steady and calm, "but sometimes, it too, Tim's nice to be treated like a regular person, not the celebrity everyone expects me to be." His words were kind, sincere even, and somehow they grounded Maria. She had worked with all kinds of people, from the loud, demanding customers to the regulars who barely said a word, but none of them had ever made her feel as if they truly saw her, truly understood what she was going through. Clint Eastwood was different. He didn't know Tamti look down on her. He didn't know Tamti judge her for her tired eyes or her messy apron. He just saw her. "I didn't mean to stare," Maria said, finally finding her voice. I didn't expect." Clint waved her off, still smiling. "It's all right, I'm just a man. Nothing more." Maria blinked, trying to process his words. She had always admired Clint Eastwood. His films had been a part of her life growing up, and now, here he was in her small diner, sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday afternoon. As she stood there, trying to absorb the weight of the situation, Clint took another sip of his coffee, then set the cup down. "I've seen people go through a lot," he said, his tone suddenly shifting, becoming more serious. "Life is always easy. We all struggle, but it's about how we handle it, how we keep moving forward when it feels like everything is falling apart." Maria listened intently, her heart starting to race again. This was now the Clint Eastwood she had seen on screen, the tough, unmovable character. This was a man who had lived, who had seen and understood hardship, a man who had fought for his place in the world just like her. "I know TM is hard," Clint continued, his voice quiet but filled with understanding. "But I also know that if you don't attempt to give up, if you keep fighting, you can make it through anything." Maria TM's eyes welled with tears. She had now expected this, a moment of vulnerability from someone she had always seen as unshakable. And yet, here he was, offering her wisdom, offering her hope. She had felt like a failure for so long. Every day felt like a battle, and there were moments when she didn't know if she could keep going. But now, standing in front of Clint Eastwood, she realized that maybe she had been looking at it all wrong. Maybe she didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe she just needed to keep moving forward one step at a time. Maria stood there holding back the tears, her hands gripping the edge of the counter for support. Clint OTM's words had struck a chord deep within her. She had been so focused on the struggles, on the hardships that seemed to weigh her down every day, that she had forgotten to believe in herself. It wasn't OTM about having it all figured out. It was about taking each step, no matter how small, and keeping forward momentum. You know? Clint continued, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel seen. The world is full of people who are waiting for something, some break, some moment to prove they are worth something. But sometimes, the hardest thing is to just keep going when no one TM's watching, when no one believes you can do it. His words felt like a lifeline thrown in her direction, and Maria felt the weight on her chest slowly begin to lift. She had spent so much time feeling invisible, struggling to make ends meet, that she had started to doubt her own worth. But Clint was showing her something else. He was showing her that the quiet perseverance, the day in, day out fight, was the path to strength. He had walked that path himself. She had seen it in his films, the way his characters always came out on top no matter the odds. But she had never imagined that Clint Eastwood, the man behind those characters, would be sitting in her diner, offering the same wisdom to a struggling waitress. I know it seems like everything TM's stacked against you, Clint said, his voice steady and calm. But TM's not. TM's just that you have TM had seen the bigger picture yet. You have more strength in you than you realize. Maria swallowed, her throat tight as she listened to him. She wasn't of town, just hearing words. She was hearing a truth she had buried deep within herself. She had the strength. She had the resilience. She had the power to turn her life around, to find her own path forward, just like the characters Clint had portrayed for years. And just like those characters, she wasn't going to let anything, not the mud on her shoes, not the bills piling up, keep her from her destiny. Thank you, she whispered, the words feeling so small compared to the weight of the moment. Clint smiled softly, the kind of smile that told her everything she needed to know. He was no here to fix her problems. He was no here to make everything magically better. But in that moment he gave her the one thing she needed most. Belief. Tauton's all part of the journey, Clint said, standing up and sliding his jacket back on. The hard days make the good ones worth it. He gave her a nod, his expression kind but firm. You are going to make it, Maria. Just keep moving forward. As Clint walked out the door, the bell above it chimed, and Maria felt the weight of the world shift just a little bit. She was no longer just a waitress, she was someone with a purpose. She had a fire in her that was TMet going out, and she wasn't going to let the world define her anymore. The days after Clint TMM's visit felt different to Maria. She woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to take control of her life, no matter how small the steps seemed. Each morning she reminded herself of his words, "I'll keep moving forward." At first it was hard to shake off the weight of her struggles, but with each passing day, she found herself more capable, more confident. She started working extra hours, picking up shifts wherever she could, but something had changed in her. She was now working just to get by anymore. She was working toward something. She began looking at her future with a fresh perspective, making small changes, setting new goals. No longer did she feel like she was drifting aimlessly through life. She had a direction. One evening after her shift, Maria sat in her small apartment, her mind racing. She thought about her dreams, the ones she had put on hold for so long. She had always wanted to go back to school to finish her degree. It seemed impossible when she was barely making ends meet. But after Clint TM's visit, she realized that it was more than just a dream. It was a possibility. Maria began to look into local programs, finding affordable options and night classes that she could fit around her work schedule. She set up a plan, taking one small step after another. She didn't need to see the entire path ahead of her. She just needed to keep moving forward. Weeks passed and Maria Item's determination started paying off. Her colleagues noticed the change in her. She was more focused, more energized, and when she took the time to talk to her customers, she found herself building stronger connections. One evening, just as she was finishing her shift, a woman came into the diner and sat at the counter. She looked around before locking eyes with Maria. There was something about the woman Makantiem's expression that reminded Maria of her own struggles. The woman looked down at the menu but hesitated before speaking. "ITM, I'll have a coffee. Please," she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Maria smiled, recognizing the look in the woman. TM's eyes the same look she had once carried. She poured the coffee and set it in front of her. "Oh, is everything okay?" Maria asked, her tone gentle, her voice filled with the same empathy Clint had shown her. The woman paused, then sighed. "I'll wait till I'm just tired. I too have been working 2 jobs for months trying to make ends meet. I too have got dreams, but it feels like they are slipping away." Tina's heart ached for the woman. She saw herself. In her, the same exhaustion, the same fear that it was all too much to handle. "Oh, why get it?" Maria said, her voice steady. "Oh well, but I promise you, TM's worth it. You TM've got the strength to keep going. You just have to believe in it." The woman looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. For a moment, there was silence, the kind of quiet that spoke volumes. Maria could see it in her eyes. The woman was holding on to a shred of hope, the same hope Maria had once almost lost. Maria did not know if the woman would believe her yet, but she knew she had planted a seed. The woman smiled softly, nodding slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. As Maria walked away, she felt something stir within her. She had been given a second chance, not just by Clint Eastwood, but by life itself. And now, she was passing that chance along to someone else. She had learned that life wasn't just about overcoming her own struggles. It was about lifting others along the way. Clint had taught her that. And now, she was paying it forward. The days went by quickly, and Maria Otam's life slowly started to shift in ways she never expected. She enrolled in night classes, determined to finish her degree and finally pursue the career she had always dreamed of. The extra hours at the diner were hard, and some days she felt like she was running on empty, but the fire within her kept her going. Each time she felt the weight of exhaustion threatening to pull her down, she remembered Clint TM's words, "Oh, TM's about how you finish." She wasn't TM just working to survive anymore. She was working to thrive. She was working for a future, a better life. One evening after a long shift, Maria sat at the counter, sipping her coffee and reflecting on the journey she had been on. It was late, the diner was quiet, and she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had made it through the worst of it. She had faced the mud, the struggles, and the doubt. And now, she was standing tall. As she took another sip of coffee, the door to the diner opened and in walked a familiar figure. Maria didn't need to look twice. She recognized him immediately, Clint Eastwood. He had walked into her diner again, this time with a soft smile on his face. Maria stood up, feeling a rush of gratitude wash over her. She had no idea what to say, but just seeing him reminded her of how far she had come. Clint looked around the nearly empty diner before his eyes settled on her. He nodded in acknowledgement. "Oh, how, TM's it going?" He asked, his voice calm, just like before. Maria couldn't her own Tim. To help but smile. "Weda, TM's going well." When she replied, her voice steady. "A lot of changes, but TM was all good." Clint raised an eyebrow as if he had known she was making progress before she had even said it. "Othader TM's good to hear. I knew you TM'd make it." The words hit her in a way that made her heart swell. It was as if Clint had known all along that she had the strength to keep going. He had been right. She had made it. She had fought through the struggle and come out stronger on the other side. Clint took a seat at the counter, and Maria, without hesitation, poured him a cup of coffee. As she set it in front of him, their eyes met once again. This time there was no judgment in her heart, no hesitation. She was no longer the struggling waitress. She was someone who had found her way. "You done well, Maria," Clint said, his voice full of approval. You come a long way from that mud-covered day. Proud of you." Maria felt a lump form in her throat. She had worked so hard to get here, and now, hearing those words from someone like Clint Eastwood made all the struggle worth it. She wasn't Tamati alone anymore. She had proven something, not just to others but to herself. "Oh, thank you," she whispered. "You were right. It told teams about how you finish." Clint nodded, his expression softening. "Oh, remember, it told teams not the end. It told teams just the beginning. You team've got a long road ahead, but you will make it. I have no doubt about that." As Clint stood to leave, he gave her one final nod. "Oh, take care of yourself, Maria," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You have got this." Maria watched him walk out the door, the rain softly tapping against the windows. She stood there for a moment, taking in everything he had said. And then, with a newfound sense of purpose, she turned back to the counter. She was ready for whatever came next. The journey was just beginning. Please subscribe channel for Clint Eastwood. Respect, thanks.